Hey guys, so this has been something sorely missed on this channel, but a proper beginner's guide on how to do penis enlargement and what to look for. Just the basics that everyone really needs to know if they're going to be practicing my flavor of PE. So over the next couple weeks, I'm going to be releasing a video on everything that a beginner would need to know based on the subject for penis enlargement. So today we're going to be talking about just the basics of growth. So like what happens when we do X, Y, and Z, how we can cause X, Y, and Z, and really lay out why penis enlargement happens. So that way, when you're doing your own routines, you have a much better understanding of what we're trying to achieve. Now, this is not just going to be like your first day in class where you get the syllabus and you go over some very overview stuff that's not really practical. This is going to make sure that you understand what we're doing, as well as I'm releasing a manual's beginner's routine at the same time that you'll be able to find at the forum at peakmalephysique.com, as well as as well as my Pornhub, depending wherever you want to find it, go for it. I just know a lot of people are having issues with Pornhub lately, so we're posting it in both places. Now, since this is going to be an ongoing series, please like and subscribe if you want to stay up to date with my content. Again, I'm going to be trying to post this weekly, so if you want to make sure that you're, learning along with the rest of us, like and subscribe. Well, mainly subscribe, but liking helps me out a lot too, strokes my ego. Now, if you just want everything right away, I've already basically written the entire script for this. It's available at peakmalephysique.com. It has all the guides and all the routines that you will need to grow for your first 6 months. That's the ultimate beginner's guide. Again, it's not going to be needed, but if you want to start right now with some of the more advanced stuff that we'll go over later on in this routine, check it out, peakmalephysique.com. Now that's out of the way. Why you should listen to me. I go by BD. That was never the intent. I would have picked something way cooler, but I started posting stuff on Reddit about 2020, 2021. I founded r/getting bigger, the largest penis enlargement community known at the moment. So I have a bit of street cred in this, but additionally, I've been doing PE since 2013. I basically went from 6 inches long by about 5 inches around to 7.5 inches long to about 6 inches around. In my first 18 months with penis enlargement, I was a bit too big for condoms and my first girlfriend, so I had to take a break. Then I got to college, and then I actually struggled to gain a decent bit because I was trying to do what everyone else was doing, and that was use water-based devices like the Bathmate and just use a lot more pressure than we really needed to use. So I stagnated all through college. In 2019, I graduated college and I picked up PE again, but this time I started looking at the older forms to see if there was anything I was missing from my routines, and that's when I started to notice a bit of a trend. But at the same time, I was taking all this old information from Thunder's Place Matters of Size, a few other forums as well, and I was slowly accumulating them into a Reddit r/getting bigger, and the rest is kind of history with that. By about 2022 or 2023, I started to look at physiotherapy research and seeing how we could apply it to penis enlargement. Because if we understand the basic building blocks of the tissue, soft tissue in general is all going to have the same type of tissue at the end of the day. If we know how those grow and respond, we can do that more efficiently to our penises over time. In the past 2 years of honing my theories on physiotherapy-based penis enlargement, I've been gaining the fastest I ever had while doing the least amount of PE I have ever done. So I started at 6 inches, got up to 7.5 inches. I was 8 inches for most of 2021, 2022. End of 2022, I caught COVID, lost some size, got back down to 8 inches while flirting with like 8.8. I am now over 9 inches long with over 6 inches in girth. The gist is I have tried many things over the years. I have failed a lot, and it's not until recently where I've really pieced it all together. So it would be my pleasure to share with you what I have figured out over the past 3 years to make it much easier for you to gain long term. Now, if you're not believing me with my sizes, that's fine. My progress pictures are going to be available in the link in the description below. I believe it will be in my link tree. So the basics of growth, we got to lay the groundwork. What causes growth? Understand the basic processes that allow us to optimize our routines later on. But there's 3 types of things that can change our size. First and most variable is going to be erection quality. Then we're going to have tissue alignment, and I'll explain more on that in a bit because that's a bit of a newer idea here. And then actual tissue growth is when we actually grow new tissue, and it's a much longer process than everything else beforehand. So first, erection quality, and again, like I already mentioned, this is the most variable because this can change just based off of sleep, diet, and lack of exercise. Harder erections are synonymous with bigger erections in most cases. If we're trying to have big, strong erections, we need a strong heart to be able to pump a lot of blood and keep that pressure relatively high in our circulatory system to fully extend our penis. But that's not always the case. We can also have some issues with muscle tone and muscle tightness in the pelvic floor. Now, the pelvic floor is a catch-all term for all the muscles that control the ins and outs downstairs. In our case, we're looking at the iliocavernous muscle, and that's basically just the erection muscle. If our iliocavernous muscle is too weak, we will not be able to squeeze off the ends of the penis, essentially, that cause the erection. So we squeeze off the ends, more blood flushes in, while less blood can come out, and that causes the erection to happen. So if those muscles aren't strong enough to apply sufficient force to the penis, it is not going to be able to get fully erect. Now, on the other side of the same coin, particularly for weightlifters who have something called a tight pelvic floor or hypertonic pelvic floor, those muscles can be chronically tight, and it does not allow a lot of blood into the penis in general, and it can be very hard to get these muscles to relax to let blood in, period. So, two different kinds of treatment. The first one for lack of muscle tone in the pelvic floor is going to be something called Kegels. That's essentially where you try to stop the flow of urine, is a good way to think of it. So like if you're ever at the toilet and you try to mess around and stop peeing and then release the pee, that's a type of Kegel. And there's going to be really hard to separate the two different muscles of the pelvic floor at first, but that's a good way to start, is thinking about that kind of contraction. For people with tight pelvic floors, we're basically going to try to stretch the pelvic girdle. Now that's all the muscles around the hip. If we apply stress, let's say this way, to our hips, it's going to cause tension, causing the muscles to stretch by proxy. So there's a few things you can do for that. There's something called frog pose, and there's the just deep squatting. So basically go all the way down, ass to ankles. You can also get handsy with it, but these treatments are going to need more discussion later on. But the gist is, if you're not doing 3 to 5 sessions of steady state cardio in zone 2, and that's basically going to be heavy breathing and not gasping, if we're looking at this like from a layman's perspective, that's what you want to be doing in the gym. It's going to be the easiest way to maximize a healthy heart, is just by doing some cardio. And then we can look at fixing these pelvic floor issues with either Kegels or different pelvic girdle stretches to loosen it up. But again, this can be discussed more in another video. Number 2, shape optimization. I forgot to mention something beforehand, so I'm just going to rip it right now. Collagen proteins make up a lot of the structural tissues in our body. There's basically a sleeve of collagen that wraps around the blood-holding part of the penis. That is what's going to be limiting the size of your erections and length and girth of your shaft. It's called the tunica albuginea. Since it's predominantly collagen, we can basically look at how collagen responds in other parts of the body to stressors, and we can use that to our advantage here. With shape optimization, collagen tends to meander and not necessarily lay flat when it is not constantly put under some kind of load. It doesn't need to be in perfect shape, so it kind of just randomly starts to meander. It's not going to be like a complete mess down there, but like, so think of it like a ruffled sheet on a bed. A ruffled sheet does not cover as much surface area as a flat sheet. So as we begin stretching the tissues, the collagen slowly moves back into place and is going to lay flatter, therefore covering more surface area, therefore our erections can be bigger. This is the basis of newbie games. Essentially, all we're doing is we're taking all the collagen that we have now and optimizing its shape to be perfectly long and perfectly wide with very little bumps and gaps in between. That way, our erections are as big as they can possibly be, granted that we have the erection quality to push said erection. Now, easiest way to do this is by stretching often. The often we stretch our penis, the more likely the tissue is going to take this shape, the bigger, longer shape. But without training, it can slowly go back to this unoptimal state. Doesn't mean you're going to lose a lot of size right away, but you will see about a 2 to 5% decrease in total size when you stop penis enlargement. And ideally, with this stretching, you want to do it 2 to 3 times a day, but lightly, not enough to cause any like structural damage. And we'll touch a little bit based on why we don't use the word damage anymore, but not enough to cause fatigue, but enough to get the tissues to remember that it needs to lay flat. And eventually the tissues will just take that flatter shape on its own. Now, tissue growth is number 3. This is what happens with long-term gain. So let's say after your first half an inch to possibly even an inch, your tissue is perfectly aligned. And the only way we can produce more size is by literally building more tissue. While this is possible, it is a lot slower than just realigning existing tissues for obvious reasons. Now, this is much like tendon and ligament hypertrophy. Our tendons and ligaments, those are the connective tissues that connect muscle to bone and bone to bone, essentially, is a good way to put it. They slowly grow in width, length, and strength when load is applied to them. So let's say you're bench pressing, your connective tissues around your shoulder are going to get stronger over time, as well as your muscles. They just don't get as strong as your muscles do because it's a different kind of tissue. Now, gymnasts will see slow growth of tendons and ligaments with constant stretching, but they're limited by their own range of motion. And since the penis is basically not anchored on both sides, we can get a lot more length gains since there's no like limiting factor in front of it to keep it from fully stretching. If you've watched some of my other videos before this, there are certain metrics we can hit. I'm not worried about this right now. That is more so when we get the hang of the basics of penis enlargement, we can start applying like some strain metrics to make sure that our routines are optimized. But right now, literally, if you just stretch like 20 minutes a day, you will grow pretty damn quickly as long as you're applying sufficient tension. Now back to collagen. Collagen is a protein, meaning it does not heal on its own. Collagen is meant to hold load, but if it receives too much load or too many loading cycles, it fails, meaning it just unravels. And a stem cell either needs to cut it out and replace it with another collagen protein or just fold it back together. Just depends on the severity of damage. And this is why we don't use damage. Damage actually implies that there's something structurally wrong with the tissue or severed in the tissue. Fatigue just means the collagen protein stopped working. So again, this is a little bit more complicated for this, but like it's good mindset framing that we're just looking for enough to fatigue and cause stimulus, but not enough work to actually hurt the tissue. Now, as already stated, stem cells in the penis will basically go along with the stretch. They can feel the stretch in whatever direction they feel the stretch, they start migrating towards, because that's where damage is most likely to be taking place. And they will go around and start repairing these collagen proteins or producing more. More than likely, it will be doing both. But since stem cells are limited in number in the penis, it's going to take a while for a lot of collagen proteins to be produced. And that's why gains can be relatively slow after the first 6 to 12 months, just because you're finally at like going beyond your natural size. Now, as I already mentioned, stem cells can feel the stretch. They are connected to the collagen strings. So as the tissue stretches, the stem cell stretches, and then that's what activates them. If we stretch long ways, the tissue is going to produce more collagen proteins long ways along the top fibrils, going up and down the shaft. Now, if we overexpand the tissues, we're going to cause more collagen proteins around the shaft. And this is what's responsible for differentiating between length and girth gains. So depending if we either stretch or overexpand our penis will determine what kind of growth we get, so we can actually choose how we want to grow. Now, normally we don't mix length and girth routines because it can just take a lot of time. But as a beginner, you can definitely do both because it's only going to take you like 10 to 20 minutes for both sessions to get maximum results. I'm not saying to do this right now, but in general, you can put on a lot of size pretty fast just by doing 10 to 20 minutes of both. When it comes to stretching, the common tools when we think of stretching are going to be vacuum hangers, extenders, and compression hangers. But since we're talking about this in a collagen perspective, penis pumps technically are very good for causing overexpansion. And that's why we use them so heavily here on the channel, because it's one of the main tools for girth. Now, for blood holding tissue, this is what's responsible for how big our erections can be. So, your max erection is going to be determined by how much blood you can push into the penis compared to how much connective tissue you have keeping the blood in. So there's going to be a point where you cannot put any more blood into the penis because there's just not enough room for the collagen in your penis to stretch and allow more blood in. And this is when you're going to be at your max size. Now, blood holding tissue is exceptionally easy to grow. It just needs mild pressure for an extended period of time. So like when we do bicep curls, there's going to be a slight increase in blood pressure in the muscle, and that's going to actually cause more vascularity over time in our biceps, solely because there's just a mild blood pressure event, and then that feeds a feedback loop essentially between the muscles getting bigger and the blood supply to the muscles getting bigger. For the penis, if we slightly overexpand, we can get the same added pressure and cause growth that way. So most common way we do it is with penis pumps again, but we can also use our hands, and that's what we're going to be using in the beginner's routine for now. But I strongly recommend that you get a penis pump long term. It just makes it so much easier and a lot safer. And full disclosure, I sell penis pumps at peakmalephysique.com, but like I would not be selling them if I did not think they were worth their weight in gold. Okay. Now, another way we can grow blood holding tissue is by cutting off blood supply, or blood oxygen more specifically. But it's relatively dangerous, particularly for people that don't know what they're doing. So your first 6 months, we're going to avoid exercises called clamping, but we may be using cock rings later on to ensure that we take this new shape. And we'll touch more on this when we get to girth and length routines in particular. But a lack of oxygen causes basically all the cells that don't have oxygen to freak out, secrete a bunch of growth factors, and then your body overcompensates and builds more blood holding tissue in that area again. We can get a similar effect with just doing mild pressure training with penis pumps and the manuals that we'll talk about in the other video. But in general, we're just not going to worry about this part right now. It just want to be a very complete guide if I didn't talk about it. So for building new blood supply, pumping for mild expansion, the exercise called mod jelks for a manual way to cause this expansion, and then clamping is the exercise that you should wait at least 6 months before you add to your routines. Now, making things easier, and this is a vast oversimplification. Now, number 5, making things easier. Now, this is a vast oversimplification of one of these techniques, but I'm just encompassing it as massage mechanics. Now, massage mechanics, we call tunica release on the more advanced stuff. We're literally just massaging the tissues of massage mechanics, okay? So this breaks down any fibrotic tissue. Now, massage mechanics do a bunch of things. First, though, they break down fibrotic tissue. So if you're an older gentleman and it's suffering from lack of use, you can get some stiff collagen in there. This will help break that up a lot over time. And then if you're a younger guy, or I guess older guy if you're a little bit freaky with it, you can develop fibrosis through, let's say, little weird masturbation habits. So with a bit of massage mechanics, we can break down some of this fibrotic buildup, most of it over time if I'm being completely honest, and have easier, bigger erections that way. Second, it encourages collagen realignment. We are literally pushing down the tissues, and hopefully that pinpoint pressure causes the collagen to lay flat amongst each other. This is particularly more useful for girth work, but it relaxes the tissues. So if the tissue is more relaxed, it's easier to expand and easier to elongate. So we can do just a bit of touchy-feely stuff right before our full stretching sessions or pumping sessions, and we're going to be able to get a lot more work done in a shorter amount of time because the penis is ready to do all this stuff. Finally, one of the more underrated parts of these stretch mechanics is that it causes the secretion of growth factors, and that's what activates the stem cells to produce more collagen proteins as well as blood holding tissue. The main exercises we do with this is semi-erect bends and BFR massage. That's going to be in the beginner's routine. There's other stuff too, but that's going to be a little bit too advanced for you guys in your first 6 months. Now, with some massage in the routines, like I've already said, we call this tunica release for the more advanced people, but we'll see faster elongation, more expansion, and potentially faster growth because of that extra growth factor release. So, while it's not necessarily needed for penis enlargement, 5 to 10 minutes of this with your session is going to be a huge help, particularly for harder gainers. Now, that basically wraps up this part of the first step. The free routine is going to be available again at the forum, peakmalephysique.com, or I guess more specifically, forum.peakmalephysique.com, as well as Pornhub, if you cannot get on the forum for whatever reason. Now, it is very similar to what I did for my first year and my first 1.5 inches of gains. I cannot promise results with it, but I do trust most of you will find some good success with it. So, get started with that. Next week, we'll be talking about some more. I actually don't know what we're talking about next week. I gotta check the script. Hopefully, I'll see you then. I'll talk to you later.